Okay, good morning. It's time to learn and grow. I'm Alana, and I'm really, really grateful to be here today with Danielle Strachman. Danielle is a businesswoman who co-founded my charter school that I attended for 5 years. It was awesome. I loved it. She also leads and organizes the 20 under 20 Peter Thiel's program, and she founded the 1517 fund that invests in entrepreneurs as young as me, right? 12, 13, which is awesome. So, anyways, thank you so much for making time to come on with me, Danielle.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alana. It's really great, and it's really great to be with somebody who understands so many different facets of my work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, so tell me, what's it like to be the leader of the entrepreneurial army? Always wondered.
I guess I haven't thought of it like an entrepreneurial army. It's funny. I was at an event the other day with a bunch of young makers, and we all had name tags on. And I've been trying out a new title for myself, which is professional fairy godmother. And that's a lot of how I really honestly feel about my work. I tell people I get to drink from the fountain of youth every day, and give people resources to make their dreams come true. And um, and on the army front, I mean, it feels to me like we just have so many people that we work with that are out there just really building for just a more incredible future. And sometimes I say about 1517 or venture fund is that, what we are is the marriage of two things. One is like big ambition, and that's the founders that we work with, and then resources, that's us. And when you put those two things together, our goal is to really make the impossible possible. And so we do it together with the people we work with. And we always tell our founders they're the captains of the ship. We're more like the navigators of a ship, of like we're saying, hey, here's kind of what we see in the broader market. Here's some things, there's an iceberg over there, but you're still the captain. You get to decide how you approach that iceberg. And in fact, when founders call, I'll often pick up and say, hey, boss, how's it going? We're here to serve them, and we're really forming this community together.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And I love that nickname, boss. I'd love to be called boss one day.
hmm
Thank
you will be.
you. I'll do my best.
Yeah.
What's the difference between 20 under 20 and 1517? I've always wondered, but I'm not sure.
So the Thiel Fellowship is a grant program. It's been going for 15 years. When it first started, it was called 20 under 20. And at the time, for the first 5 years of the program, it was for people that you had to be under 20 years old when you applied. So I think our youngest Teal Fellow was maybe 16. That was Thomas Somers, who was still in high school when he accepted a Teal Fellowship. And it was funny, we weren't yet ready to sort of tackle the problems with high school yet. And part of our program is about giving young people resources. So instead of going to college, they can take their full-time time to work on a project of their choosing outside of school or other employment. And Thomas, like I said, was in high school. And we said, I don't think we're ready to make you like ask to have you leave high school. And he's like, oh, no, 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 no. He's like, I'm going to get my GED and I'm going to do the fellowship and this is what I want. And I was like, okay, great. And what's funny is, gosh, Thomas. Yeah, there's no way he's even 30 yet. And we've been working with him, he's got to be in his like mid-late 20s now. And we're working with him on his latest company called Positron AI, which works in, just like in the AI infrastructure space. So it's amazing to see what people do over time. But the fellowship is a grant, and now it's for people who are 22 and under. I'm pretty sure it's 22 and under, not 23 and under. I haven't worked there for 10 years, so I don't always know all the details. But they also, this year, they upped the grant to 200K.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was pretty exciting to see. And with a grant that's non-equity based, and so that grant goes to the person. When Michael and I decided to start 1517, we were thinking about, you know, we wanted to scale what we were doing with the Teal Fellowship. And we also knew that the fellowship would be pretty capped at the number of people they could work with. And it's a very generous program, but we also thought there'd be another model, which would be through venture capital, that we could do something even bigger. And so when you have a venture capital fund, the way that typically works is that you offer money into a company instead of a person. And then for that money, you get a share of the company, so that if later on the company has an extraordinary outcome, then you get to share in the upside of that. We also have a grant program we run at 1517 called the Medici Project, where we'll give a young person $1,000 to just work on a project of their choosing. And that's just a grant. That's not equity based at all. And so the ethos are very the same, but just the structure of how we do things is a little bit different.
Is venture capitalism, that's like Shark Tank, right?
Yeah. So my mom said
Okay.
that a couple of years. And I was like, oh, my mom like kind of gets what venture capital is. So yeah, venture capital, let's see how to describe it. So venture capital is a tool for making a company grow very, very fast. And I will say it's just one mechanism for doing that. I'm not someone who thinks that like every company is supposed to be, sometimes it's called a VC backable company. Um, my first company was a tutoring company. That was not a large growing company. It was just me and a couple other tutors. I did this in San Diego. And I learned so much from the experience. And I think if I had been building that company today, there's so much emphasis on building a startup. And the definition of a startup is a fast growing, scaling company. I probably would have felt pretty deterred from running my tutoring company. But I always tell people, like, whatever business you start with, that's great. And not everything has to be some big gargantuan company or even with like the ambition to do that. When I was running my tutoring company, I was just getting something off the ground. I knew about the types of students I wanted to serve. And that led me to starting Innovations Academy, which was a bigger organization for a lot of the philosophy that I had in my tutoring company and then working with homeschoolers. And of course, that's a nonprofit, so that is also not a venture backable company. But when someone is building something where they say, I have this idea, um, and I'm going to need more capital to get this started than I could bootstrap through my own finances or through customers. That's kind of where venture capital comes into play. It tends to be in technology companies that have the chance to grow very quickly within a 10-year period. And the reason for that 10-year period is because we have investors that we work with who trust us with their finances to ideally make them lots of money. And that period of time is a 10-year period. And so we need to make sure that we're good stewards of capital by doing the best we can within that time frame.
Got it.
Yeah.
Just wondering, is it always 10 years or could it be like longer or
Um,
shorter?
so one of a famous quote is you get what you negotiate. And so people do negotiate what those structures are, but typically industry standard is 10 years. So in our fund, we are a 10-year fund and we have two 1-year extensions. So we just took our first 1-year extension because our first fund turned 10 years old this year. So technically we'll get like 2 years. Now I was talking to someone the other day and I was saying, maybe in the future, because 1517 does so much deep tech, I might like to set the expectation that maybe we have like 12 years with two 1-year extensions. But there's this sense of, as someone who is in capital markets, you have to see what the market will bear and who will support you with that. So you can say as much as you want that that's the timeline you want, but it's about if investors meet you at the table for that.
That makes sense. Um, Off of that topics, I know you mentioned Innovations Academy, and then
Yeah.
a couple points was that it was a lot different than, or it was a lot different than all the other schools that all my friends went to. We didn't have
Mm.
homework. There
Yeah.
weren't any periods, only one teacher. You
Yeah.
called them by their first name. I loved it. It was like
Yeah.
awesome, and I loved school. Sucks that I had to bounce. And then homeschool,
Yeah.
and then you also mentioned high school. So I
Yeah.
was wondering, what do you think is the best like early education for preteens and
Oh
teenagers?
gosh. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on the person. I'm very interested in individual choice. So I don't think that Innovations Academy is the best school for all students. I don't think the Thiel Fellowship is the best thing for all young people, or that 1517 is the best thing for all young people. I'm very much more about what is the right choice for you at the right time. I know people who homeschool during middle school because middle school does tend to be kind of just a really tough time, like, socially, emotionally, and I've known a number of families that have chosen the route of homeschooling during that time period. And it's worked out really well for them because it gave their family time to maturate through that kind of tumultuous period of, being like 11-ish to 13 or 14. And I know people who have done things in all different manners. And I think what I'm really about is conscious decision making. And so, for example, when we started Innovations Academy, the reason that we started it was because Christine Kuglin's children, she's the co-founder and has been reigning director. She has 4 kids, and her kids started, and she was an unschooler. I mean, she was really radical. And I worked in a co-op that they had that was based on unschooling, principles, where if I was teaching my creative writing class there and a kid just wasn't feeling it, they could just like get up and go. And it was fine. Like there was no like, oh, why are you leaving? Or you have to ask permission. It's just like, oh, okay, Bobby's not feeling it today. That's cool. Like moving on. Which is, funny that that's a radical thing. Like, to me, that's just about human agency and autonomy. Um, but But yeah, her children at one point said, "Hey, like we love you, Mom. We love unschooling, but we want to try to go to school." And so what I really respect about her and her philosophy is that it's really child-led. So when her children started saying, "I want to go to school," she's like, "Okay, let's make that happen now." So it wasn't about her, it was about what her children needed and wanted at the time. I am very into giving young people experiences of making and building things because there's a confidence that you get from doing that it's hard to get through academic learning. We have a bunch of quotes from some of our founders, um, just about like building and making, to sort of almost like a little love letter to the next generation. And one of the quotes that one of the founders put was something like, build anything, build a bench. Like it could be, like an art project. It doesn't matter what it is because the act of doing that is going to bring forth some sort of new character in you that you may not have known existed before. So that to me is really important to give young people the opportunity to build and make things that they might not otherwise have the opportunity to do. Um, but yeah, I think education just needs to look pretty individual for each person.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, if like I know a couple kids who like don't have a choice, like their parents like really want them in regular school. Do you think that
Mhm.
they could still do all that making
Yeah.
and build things even while they're in school?
Yes. Yeah, that's one of my really big things actually, is that, even, I know families that, families or even just like the children in the families really like believe that school or education should look a different way, but for various reasons, they're not able to enact that, in the school day time period. Maybe the parents aren't into the homeschooling thing yet. Maybe they are into the homeschooling thing, but can't support it yet. Um, and so, yeah, I'm really big on, hey, you know what? There is other time in the day. And any time that you can take to carve out and say like, hey, yeah, I'm really going to focus on X, Y, or Z, whatever that is really important. And, there was a, there was a Twitter thread I saw over the pandemic that just kind of drove me crazy. And it was like this big sister saying about her little brother, like, oh, my little brother is so bored that he just plays guitar all day. And I was like, oh,
That's
I was like,
awesome.
that's not boredom, that's motivation. And I think we have this way of looking at what other people are doing and judging it in the wrong way or having the wrong perspective about it. And so to me, that's like such pure motivation that that person is like picking up the guitar and that's what they're doing and they're mastering their craft. But to somebody else, they have a judgment about how that person should be spending their time. Um, And it causes lots of problems when we get into that. I mean, we could get into whole things about sort of like mimetic thinking and things like that there of like that what I think you should do, um, should be the way that you do it. I do think it's important for people to have influence and to say, hey, have you thought about trying this or trying that? Sometimes it's that exposure to something new that makes us interested in it. And if we've never come across it before, we might not know that something would ring true for us. But yeah, overall, I think that, you know, young people, even if they're in a traditional school, can carve out some amount of time to be able to do the things that they're really passionate about. And you know this especially. There's so much at your fingertips in terms of, being able to use LLMs as like a companion learning sidekick to like dig into something really, really deeply. Um, and that did not exist previously. And so it's just a great tool to take advantage of.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
When you were talking about how people like judge you for doing something or making or being or using your time
Mm,
doing something that they don't like or something like that, that
yeah.
made me think of the dropouts, like the college and
Mm,
high school dropouts.
sure.
I remember when I went to the 15-17 fund at Innovations Academy or the meetup.
Oh, yeah, the summit we had.
Um, yeah, the summit. I met a lot of different people
Yeah,
who said they were dropouts. Can you tell me more about that? I still
sure.
don't really understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so to me, the label dropout is kind of a funny one because typically, like, dropout also used to have this connotation, I would say, in like, I mean, anytime before, I don't know, 2010. I mean, and this goes back to like the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s, that if you dropped out of school, it meant something really bad. It was like, it was basically saying you're a loser. Like, oh, you're a dropout. That means you're a loser. That means you couldn't cut it. You couldn't sort of like stay with the pack, or that there was something wrong with you. And so when I was on the team founding the Thiel Fellowship, we were kind of taking back ownership of that phrase of like, hey, like, you know what? Like, it's okay to drop out of systems. And I think our meta point is actually larger than just school. It's like, it's okay to say that certain systems are not ones you want to opt into. I gave a talk a bunch of years ago to a group of women entrepreneurs. And one of the things that I was talking to them about is that leading the C-suite by starting a company is a way to really co-opt a system. There's a lot, if you go to a conference like Grace Hopper, there are a lot of sessions about like how do you get into the C-suite and how do you climb the ladder and all this stuff. And I'm like, hello, how about you just go all the way around and usurp it? And when you start a company, for better or worse, you get to give yourself a title. And you don't need to necessarily go through some huge system. Now, obviously, not everyone is going to be a company founder, but I like to think about this of like, how can you go around systems? Because systems are just things that are made up by humans. Systems can really trap us in certain mindsets. And so coming back to the dropout thing, we were kind of reclaiming a dropout as like a totally fine, reasonable thing to do. And one thing in this day and age that I like to talk to young people about is they'll be like, oh yeah, should I drop out? And I'm like, well, what are you dropping into? Like you have to drop into something. Um, and it might be dropping into a job. It might be dropping into a startup that you want to start. It might be dropping into an internship. So like I'm all about conscious decision making on your path. If someone came to me and they were like, Danielle, I'm dropping out because I heard that you said dropping out was cool or something, I'd be like, no, that's not the message. And we've had people who have paused school and done like a gap semester or a gap year and then gone back and forth. So I think there's all kinds of different ways to do things, but I think it's been interesting to watch over many decades now, the term dropout have different connotations. And today, dropping out is like cool, which is a little bit problematic because that might not be the right choice for someone. And you want to make sure you're doing something because it's the right choice for you, not because it's like the cool thing to do.
That makes sense. I guess
Yeah.
it depends on what you're going to do once you're out and
Mhm.
what you're dropping into, right?
Yes, yes. I'm really curious, Alana, and I know we want to have this conversation. I'm curious, like, um, when you talk to peers, like, does the topic of like dropping out come up, and what does that mean to you all?
I've never heard anybody in my peer group say that they were
Mm,
going to drop out.
all
It's
right,
either
interesting.
like going into athletics because I'm like big in jujitsu and wrestling.
Yeah,
So like I'm not, or it's either I'm not going to go to college or just talking about college and I'm going to
right.
focus on athletics,
Yep.
or it's I wonder what college I'm going to in a couple years.
Yeah.
I've never heard any of my friends or anybody I know say like maybe I'll do a year and then I'll drop out and start a business or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that a lot of them would have the skill set too. They just maybe don't know about it and don't think about it,
Mhm.
which
Interesting.
is, yeah, I wish that maybe I'll tell them. I don't know.
Well, it's just an open conversation of like, I'm always like really surprised. Like, and I get that there are incentive structures that keep schools doing the same thing the same way, but I'm always surprised that there aren't programs that are just like 1 or 2 years. And it's like, hey, you get that time away from your family and to learn how to kind of be on your own and how to really interface full on with your peer group and things like that. But without the whole, it has to be a 4-year degree thing. Because I meet a lot of young people who get a lot out of maybe that first year of school. And then they're like, all right, the opportunity cost is too high. I've gotten, potential job offers or internships, or I have ideas I want to work on. Um, and it doesn't necessarily make sense to stay for another 3 years. Sometimes I think about this a bit like transportation. Like when I went to school, I went to college, I went for a 4-year degree, but this was like laptops were just coming out when I was in college. And you couldn't like the barrier to entry to start a company was just very high. The internet was still in the pretty early-ish days. And it was a stranger, like in my opinion, more interesting internet at that time. It was a fascinating place. Um, but um, but for me, it made sense because I didn't have another option of what I would do. I do remember telling my mom, I remember getting admitted to where I wanted to go. And then I had that like quick moment of like, oh my gosh, do I want to do this? And I said it out loud. And my mom got right here in my face, like right up close. And she's like, you're going to school. And I was like, oh, I
Okay.
guess I'm going to school. It's interesting though, because I got into grad school and I had the same question. And that's where I ended up getting off the academic train. But there just weren't as many options and choices. And so now when I think, we're in 2025, the options are just different. Like you can work at a bunch of different places. You can intern a bunch of different places. You could start multiple projects in even just a year or sometimes even in a semester. And so I feel like um, it would be a bit like, once airplanes, or eventually once like supersonic jets are doing passenger flights, it doesn't make sense to like say, I'm going to use a horse and buggy to get across the United States. Like it's like there's this new tech that we can use. And somehow higher education has never caught up that like the pace of things is faster and that 4 years actually is a lot like slower than it used to be in terms of like the opportunity cost of what you could be doing with that time. Um, so yeah, that's a conundrum to me.
That's interesting. And I guess I did think that nowadays, since there's like the internet and AI and computers and
Yeah.
stuff, there'd be like a lot more like entrepreneurs and different opportunities and ways to go, but I've just never thought about it like that, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think schools don't really want people to think about it that much. I think this is one of the hard parts of large systems is that just like human beings want to sustain themselves, large systems also want to sustain themselves. Um, and sometimes that means you have to evolve, but sometimes that evolution can be quite slow on the systemic level.
I guess you could think like a system, or you could think of the system like a being, then that's
Yes,
fine.
absolutely. Yeah. 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 Very much so.
Interesting. Um, The new technology thing that kind of made me think about this AI revolution that's happening.
Mhm.
How big of an increase in like AI tech and tech companies have you seen in the past couple of years?
I mean, it's exploding. Like one of the things that's interesting about working in venture capital is that you get to kind of see what trends are coming. And everybody is pitching like an AI for X company. It's like AI for dog walking, AI for accounting, AI for education. Where we get most excited at 15, 17 is on the infrastructure side. So for example, I mentioned this company, Positron AI. They're working on the infrastructure layer to make AI work more effectively and efficiently. And that's where we get really interested because we don't think we're smart enough to know like if one team is pitching us on like AI and accounting. And this has happened actually where, we talk to one person, we're like, wow, this thing seems really neat. And then we get the same pitch three more times, like a week later, and we're like, okay, this is very crowded. And I don't know how I would pick if this team is the one who's gonna like go for it or if that team is going to be the one to go for it. And that's just pretending there are two teams, but there's probably like, hundreds or maybe even thousands of these teams working towards similar aims.
That makes sense. And that was actually one of my questions because I know everyone's talking about like building AI and working in AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aren't there like maybe they'd overlap and stuff? I don't know.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes teams will get together, especially in the early days, and see like, hey, like we're doing similar things. Like, let's get together on this. I think people really do like taking sort of a shot on goal on their own idea and seeing it through, which also, makes sense. One thing that I'm seeing that has been super interesting is we have a program called Flux where we try to kind of unearth wily scientists from anywhere and offer them investment money to work on R&D that could become commercializable. And in our Flux applications, I noticed we had a ton of biotech stuff, which is very interesting to me because it means the barrier to entry on biotech is coming down. And of course, after doing more review of those applications, I saw an intersection of biotech and AI of like, how do we apply AI to this arena, so that we have more like high throughput drug screening and just all kinds of different endeavors. And so I think those intersections are really interesting. Um, and they can get really crowded.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And I feel like AI, do you think it could overlap with anything, or would it be like um
So, I
enclosed
mean,
to just
could it?
sciences?
Could it? Yes, absolutely. I have sort of this funny thought that I've been developing, which is that I think one area that, um, I mean, it started overlapping pretty early on in like sort of the art maker side of things. But what I'm also noticing is that I think we're going to see a resurgence of sort of like the Renaissance person, where it's like, okay, cool, like I learned like some academic drawing and I also do mosaic and I do this and like people who are like full on artists who have a craft that they're developing fully. I think we're gonna see that um, people are gonna value something that is made by the human hand and soul in a way that we have not seen before. And I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg on this. So sometimes I've been joking that with 15, 17, like, yes, we back technology companies right now, but maybe by the time we're on Fund 7, it'll be like, I found this amazing person who does cross stitch and like she's making a killing because it's hard to find people who are like real craftsmen of their work at this point. Um, so I think that's an area where people don't want AI to touch it so much, where it's like, okay, we want to know, I've been reading some C.S. Lewis, and C.S. Lewis has just such a grasp of like the internal human workings and condition. And there's just these beautiful, beautiful sentences and paragraphs, and of course, whole stories that he writes. And like when you think like, wow, like this person, like that's like a feat of nature, like that this person put something out that is beautiful, like that is that beautiful. And if I think about like, oh, like if it had been like assisted in some sort of way, I don't know. For me personally, it takes away some of that beauty. But I also have seen a lot of the power of using these models, and I'm also really blown away by that because you can kind of think of some of these models like almost like a collective consciousness, which is also an interesting way to think about things. So I think that there are places where I mean, I do think AI has the potential to kind of go into everything. I mean, it is it's a layer that it's here and it's here to stay. And I think there are places where people might think of it as like sacred to not include that layer.
That's kind of interesting that you bring that up because exactly what I was going to say after you mentioned like AI and then the sciences was art made by AI.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time in my online humanities class, my guide, they call themselves, she brought up this article because it was like this person had used AI to render a digital painting or something and put it in an art competition. And it was like everybody was like, "Oh man, this like shouldn't count, right?" Because it was made by AI. But the guy
Mm-hmm.
was like, "Well, it's art, right?" And I know it's digital, and I think that like the physical arts, like I don't think AI could do that unless it like instructed a human. But no,
Oh, I got to see it's coming. So I got to see
yeah.
a painting robot the other day, and it
Oh,
was
okay,
really
never mind.
cool. And it was made by an artist.
Wow,
Um, And yeah, I was at an event and I walked by and there's this like little robotic arm that had a program in it to what it was doing was helping an artist to like replicate their own work. Where it's like, hey, this is one of my paintings and now we're gonna make this painting 20 times. And we're gonna sell
wow,
this painting 20 times. Because there's something in the art market where if you think about it, you can have a print of something, but a print is going to be very different than something that's actually painted. And the rate at which you can charge for something that's actually painted is different than if it's a print and so on. And so there's interesting things coming. And this is really neat to see. Because yeah, it was just out at this event and this little robot arm like, dipping into paints and putting it on the canvas. And I was like, wow, there it is.
that's crazy. Well,
Yeah.
I take back what I said. Then I guess robots and AI can do all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh
Hmm.
well. And then I agree with what you said on writing and C.S. Lewis. Like
Mm.
I sometimes I've seen people use AI for writing like ChatGPT and Grammarly and stuff. But I feel like it doesn't have the same poetic twist as some of the other writers that I've read
Oh
do.
yeah.
It could pass off as it, but I don't think it's the same.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I,
that's kind of like this big debate out there is like there's a huge debate if like AI art is art and these types of debates have gone on for a long time. I mean, when the calculator came out, people railed against it and were like, "Oh, like this is terrible." And I actually don't think the argument is totally wrong. I think there's something about like using your mind to calculate things that is definitely different than having a calculator do it. But of course, as someone who, wants to see more choices in the future, um, I want to see tech be out there. And then the question is like, how does each individual decide to use it?
makes sense.
Yeah.
One of the things I was thinking about was how, like you just said with the calculators, people might not don't react to everything
Mhm.
awesomely every single time.
Oh yeah, no.
I know that's happened with like cars and things like that. And I
Sure.
know I think that happened with AI, but I was hearing mostly positive things. Do you
Mhm.
agree, or were you hearing other
I
things?
hear I hear across the board. I hear across the board things. I mean, I think on the like learning companion side, people are very excited about it in terms of like, wow, I was able to just have a full-on conversation with Grok and be able to like talk out some things I've been thinking about, or like I have friends who have been using Claude as a therapist and are having incredible results where it's like, hey, they still have their human therapist they work with, but that person's only available to them generally like once a week at most. And like they're using these models to really help them think and feel through things that might be difficult during the rest of the week. And I think that's astounding. I think that's really amazing. Would I want these models to necessarily replace people entirely? No. But do I think that it's amazing that it can assist people? Absolutely, yes. So I think people have a lot of different mixed um, thoughts and feelings about these areas. It's interesting. I've been trying to show my mom a little bit how to use ChatGPT, and I'm like, look, it's just an app. You put it on your phone, and here it is, and she's taking to it. Uh, I mean, maybe not quickly. She's still used to Googling something. Like we get into our habits. But she's also open to like, hey, yeah, let me try this out. And I did something fun and creative where my house is being renovated and I wanted to do a mock-up of what the front of my house might look like with certain paint colors and experiment with like all these different paint colors. And we'll see what my house looks like at the end, but I'm like, this was a pretty cool tool to use to like just try something kind of uh fun and like for my house. And normally I use these models for things like I'm on a pitch meeting and I need to know what a metal foil pump infusion is. And okay, let me look that up and ask it to tell it to me like I'm in kindergarten. Like,
That makes sense, actually.
yeah.
That's a good way of using it. I should start that.
Oh, it's so great for trying to get a primer. Actually, one thing that Christine taught me from Innovations Academy, gosh, we've known each other for, yeah, 20 years now. Um, she used to tell me that when she wanted to learn something new, she would go to the children's section and she would get a book on it from like the children's section. And that would become her primer for learning about a field. And I never forgot that. So yeah, oftentimes when I'm prompting these models, I'm like, hey, tell me about this thing, you know, as if I'm in kindergarten or as if I'm in elementary school. Like, let's start at the basics. Or, hey, give me the like top 10 lexicon of this field and explain it to me like I'm 10 years old, so that I can kind of understand what's happening here. And it's great. Like, and this is another skill that people are learning is how to prompt. It was funny when I was doing my home renovation project because I was trying to get, I was taking photos of my house and I was like putting it in to ChatGPT and I was trying to get it to make my house longer. It kept making it really short. And I was like, make my house longer. And I like not giving it like a very specific prompt. It would like make it a little longer. And I'd be like, make my house 4 times as long, and being like more specific with it. And then I would like get closer to what I wanted. And so this idea of like learning how to prompt is something that I think everyone is going to have to learn. Just like when people started using search, people had to start thinking about, okay, like how do I search effectively for something? Now, what we all need to learn is how to prompt effectively for something.
That's interesting because I remember like researching for some school paper and my teacher was talking about learning how to search on Google correctly or well, I guess.
Yeah.
And that also connects to this thing. So my dad, he was Googling something
Mm.
and I noted because he uses Grok all the time for like
Yeah.
everything. He loves it. And so he'll like put in a prompt and I've kind of like come to recognize how he puts in things for Grok. And he
Mm.
was asking Google a question as if it was an AI, which I
Mm.
thought was interesting because I know that Google does have AI, but they're two
Right.
different things.
Yeah. That's
But
interesting. I'll have to
yeah,
try that. Like, yeah, at this point, I'm often going to models for things instead of Google, but I'll have to try to think of, yeah, like switch that prompt engineering mindset on Google and see like, does it give me something different?
yeah. And then not according to AI, but my mom was doing the exact same thing that you're doing with the AI in the house
No,
because
no way.
they're doing something and she was like, show me a house with, or she put in a photo and she was like, repaint my house to blue, repaint my house to white. So
Totally.
thought
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Yeah, it's been a neat, I mean, I took it to my contractor that I work with and I was like, okay, this is kind of what I'm going for. He's like, that looks really good. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, I did all these versions of it and like, this is the one that I think looks best. And I'm curious, like once especially the paint job is done to take a picture of the front of the house and like compare like, okay, this is what ChatGPT gave me. This is what the actual house looks like now. Like, let's see how it goes. I did have a slight freak out because I think the and I got very specific about which green and from which company and all this stuff. And I went over to my house the other day and the green was painted in the right places, but it looked at like somewhat of a different color. And I was like, oh
Oh
my God.
no.
I was like, It might be a little too bright, but I think it was mostly that the paint hadn't dried yet, and now it looks
Mm,
like more like the tone, So
okay.
I think as like with, when Wikipedia came out, gosh, I think I was in college when Wikipedia came out, and I remember our teachers were like, "You can't use Wikipedia. You don't know if it's factual, blah blah blah." And it's like, a little bit of the same things with these models because they do hallucinate and they're not like telling you 100% certainty this is exactly what you're going to get. So I think it's important that we still use, our faculties and skepticism to be like, okay, maybe this is, maybe this is true. But maybe there's some hallucination that is happening here also.
Even now, when I was at Innovations Academy, some of my teachers, not all of them, but some of them
Yeah.
would be like, "Oh, Wikipedia, it's edited by so many people. Don't use it. Use these school-approved websites."
Yeah, yeah,
I just
yeah,
thought that was funny. I would use
yeah,
it anyways, but it would say the
sure.
same thing. There wasn't any problem.
Yeah.
But I think that's interesting how they're still doing that.
Hmm.
Totally not related, but I was wondering, for all the other people that might be listening,
Yeah.
are there any outstanding qualities that 15, 17, and I don't know what you call it now, but 22 or under 22 under 22 or something
Which is
is
the Teal Fellowship.
the
Yeah.
Teal Fellowship. Are there any outstanding qualities that you guys are looking for in different candidates?
Yeah, let's see. I mean, one is just the ability to get started and make things. Like we talk to lots of teams who will then say, "Hey, I need to hire this person to come build this thing." And usually in the early days, you don't have enough resources to like hire someone who's super advanced in something. So I'm always telling people, you need to learn enough about how to build what you're building to be a little bit dangerous in it. And sometimes that means like learning a lot of things and starting from scratch and being a novice, and that's okay. And so we look a lot at teams who can start doing that build process. And then there's something that we look for. I think passion is really important. We often are looking at what is the background story of the person and why are they doing this? We had a team that pitched us one time. I don't remember exactly what they were doing, but I wasn't getting that like fire in the belly feeling from the founders. And I was like, hey, like why? Tell me why you're building this. And they were like, oh, we think it's a huge market opportunity. And I was like, oh man, I was like, okay, they're not really picking up what I'm getting at here. And then another team member actually tried again. And they were like, no, but really, why are you building this? Like, what's like the background about it? And they're like, well, we just think this is a huge market opportunity. And like, huge market opportunity is something that you have to have when you're building a venture scalable startup, especially in this case of 15, 17, since we are a venture firm. Um, but something being a large market isn't going to get you through the hard times when you're like, oh my gosh, me and my co-founder are on the verge of breaking up. The tech isn't working. My parents are mad at me because I'm not in school right now. Like market sizing isn't going to be the thing that makes you say, okay, I need to continue this. It's usually a personal passion or mission, or sometimes even almost a calling that a person has where they're like, I have to do this. Like sometimes they're an inventor type and they like have to make what they're making because they see a very different future from the outcomes of it. Sometimes it's a very personal story about something that's happened in their family and they're trying to sort of like right a situation. And we find that that is really important because that's what's going to get you through the really hard times is like you're doing this because it's something that's not just in your mind, but it's like in your heart and in your gut. So those are one of the traits. And actually, for more of these traits, my colleague Michael wrote a book called Paper Belt on Fire. And we have a whole chapter dedicated to the traits that we look for. And so that's it's a fun read. And I'm not just saying that. It reads a bit more like an action adventure tale than a business
Cool.
book.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I love those kinds of books.
Oh yeah, it's a fun read.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. That's very insightful and
Yeah.
a good point because I guess I was thinking about that. Like maybe if they just wanted like for the money or something, then maybe it wouldn't be like the best drive.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure
a
if
good way
they
to say it. The drive, like their drive has to be like in the right place.
makes sense. I'm
Yeah.
sure if they did have it, then it'd be successful.
Yeah.
Do you find that the companies and the founders with that drive and passion, do they always do a good job or sometimes do they
You know,
hiccup?
I would say that yes, they always do a good job in moving something forward. Um, and that doesn't mean that it ends in like success. Like sometimes you try things that are really hard and they don't go the way that you want them to because of forces that are bigger than you, like market forces or something changes or a competitor kind of comes out of the woodwork and you're like, oh man. But I would say everyone is putting their best energy into what they're doing. And we know that a lot of founding something is a learning experience, no matter what the outcome is. And we're really clear with that with our founders that we know the most likely outcome for anything that anyone's building is actually not that it becomes a gargantuan company, but that it goes to zero. And we want that knowledge that we have to be freeing for founders so they know we're not going to come knocking on their door saying like, hey, where's our money? You owe us something. Like, we're like, no, you put your whole self on the line. You've done this incredibly courageous act. You're now at the end of this particular part of the journey, and how can we support you on what's next, whether that's working with another company, starting something new. Maybe there's a school component in there, like, it looks different for everybody, but I think everybody's um, sort of being is in the right place of like, hey, I'm putting my all and my best into this.
But that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then connected to that, would you have any advice for people maybe who don't have that drive yet or are doing they're working something or working on
Yeah.
something?
I'm going to go back to what I said about um, that like Twitter thread of think about the things you would do when you're bored. Like, what are the things that you just love to spend time on? Um, and sometimes you might think into your past. I remember I had a team, they were working on a startup, and it was more because they saw a big market opportunity. And I was in person with this team, and I said to them, I was like, listen, I was like, I know I've only talked to you guys for like 30 minutes, but I'm just not feeling the fire in the belly. Like what's something like think about your childhood. I was like, what's something that you were just enamored with as a kid? And this one guy was funny. He like piped up and all of a sudden he had way more energy than the rest of the meeting. And he's like, trains. I love trains. And I was like, okay, cool. Maybe there's something in trains for you. And it's interesting. Him and his co-founder actually ended up building software for some train systems that they ended up selling to Amtrak. Um,
Wow. Okay.
and so it was like, wow, that is so cool that like he went back to his love of trains and like figured out something to build in that arena. And so I often tell people that like, don't be afraid to think back to when you were younger and maybe a little less inhibited about just what you love and like see what comes from that because you never know. And yeah, in this particular case, I was like, wow, that's pretty wild that you went from building something that you just were kind of ho-hum about to like, yeah, we're building for trains and like sold their product to a large company.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, imagine. That'd be so cool if I could do that.
Yeah.
I'm sure I
And
can, but wow, that's awesome.
well, yeah, and you can. And what I would think about, Alana, is just like what are the things where it just fills you with like excitement to build in whatever arena that might be. Do you have areas right now that you really like to make things?
Making, I love painting and drawing. I'm not the
Oh, I love
best,
that
but that's a
too.
hobby for sure.
Oh, I love that. I love painting and drawing too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
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 That's a hobby because I know I'm like very physical with grappling and things like that,
Yeah.
but I love using my hands. Just don't get
Yeah.
to do it often.
Yeah, no, it's true. And the thing I always have to remember about like especially things like painting and drawing is to just do it and just be like, all right, I'm just doing it. I'm just putting my hand down with the pencil or getting my watercolors out or whatever it is and just like kind of go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. And I did that like a couple weeks ago and it turned out okay.
Yeah.
I did a painting of a flower. It was awesome.
Oh,
Really fun.
wonderful. That's
Yeah.
funny. I also just did a painting of a flower.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. Cool.
flowers are awesome. That's all I can say.
It's true. Nature is great.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, I'm gonna have to start wrapping up in a couple minutes because I have another appointment that I need to get to.
No worries. I was just gonna get to that.
Okay, cool.
One last point.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that you'd be interested in me talking to and asking
Mm.
more about these different topics? Just off the top of your head.
Gosh, he might be 19 now, but he was 18 when he started with 15, 17. He is a young man who is working on extraction of rare earth minerals. And he started with us when he was 16 as a grantee. And, he was making things in his garage at home, and just kind of getting started with what he's doing. He was actually just awarded a Thiel Fellowship.
Wow.
So that's been exciting. His name is Human. And I'd be happy to send something over to Human. His company is called Solcoa, and see if he'd be game for an interview, because I think he'd have a lot to tell your audience in terms of, hey, like here's kind of how I got started. And I remember when I was at his lab space, um, he's geeking out all about the science. And I was like, hold on, time out. I was like, how did you even think of this? Like, how did you even start? And he's like, I had no money. I had no resources. I just had this like little corner of, I think it was either a garage or basement at home. And so I had to think about how to do these things with nothing. And I just started generating ideas and then starting to test them. And I was just amazed by it. And so I think his story would be really impactful for your audience.
Got it. Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah.
I'll contact him and or ask for details later.
Yeah.
Sounds amazing. Thank you so much.
Cool. Yeah.
Well, anyways, that's all I had.
Okay,
Do you
cool.
have any other points or anything like that?
I would just say if anyone listening wants to reach out, best way to reach out to me is through email, Danielle at 1517fund.com. And I love to hear from people. We love giving grants out to makers, and those can be makers on like the hardware side, makers actually even on the artistic side. Like we love to help people get materials so that they can start building more of that confidence being a maker. So we'd love to hear from people who are listening.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Cool.
much.
Thank you so much for the time today, Alana. Great to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah.